very excited to get it on with, to finally get to do what we've been trained to do for so long with airplanes that have really never been tested with American hands.
Started going north. Iraq still had all their electricity, so all the cities were lit up with lights. You could see Baghdad off in the far horizon. You could see the Euphrates and Tigris along there. There's obviously people and electricity there, so there's lights along there. That was lit up. All the little towns were lit up, and as we started approaching them, you could see like little Christmas tree lights just sprinkling all over. Just everything was just sparkling at us. That was a AAA being shot at us. And you can see like snakes from the medium-sized AAA, just tracer bullets, and they look like big long snakes coming up in the air.
My wife and I had a little girl 13 days after the war started, taxiing out, and time to think about, reflect a little bit, after the first couple weeks of the war. Yeah, I thought about my little girl, wanted to make sure I got home to see her, and make sure she had a daddy to see once I got home. Throughout the brief, stepping out to the jets, your entire focus is on getting the job done and bringing everybody home safely. You're so focused on doing the job and being in position and watching your radar. You think you're going to act one way, and then you hope you act one way, and once you get up in the air, you may act a little different.
Especially after the war started, when we started seeing the polls and stuff and how much support the president had. And, that just made us more proud to go out there and do our job and fight for America, because we knew that just about the entire nation was supporting us and backing us up. And, that's an American dream, and certainly pretty much everyone in the military's dream is to be united. So it was just super to see that.
Every day, there is an order that comes down. It covers every mission, every time over target, every call sign, if tankers are involved, every air refueling track. It's a team effort it's unbelievable in scope, and everyone has a small part to play, and taken together, these individual missions come together to form what guys will call a package. largest package I was ever involved on a runway was 16 F-16s, and we took darn near I guess I could figure out, about 5,000 feet of runway, just lining the aircraft up. So it's really neat to sit back there, let's say as number 10 or 12, and look at all these afterburners light, and it takes obviously several minutes just to get the aircraft airborne. So it's really a neat feeling to see all that kind of air power on the runway all at once. The visibility in that aircraft is unbelievable. You feel like you're almost outside, and all you're looking at, you can barely see over the nose. The wings are well behind you, so that's not in your peripheral vision. You feel like you're on the end of a pencil, and the pencil is a huge jet engine. It's still quite a feeling to go ahead and run the motor up and light the afterburner and get cruising down the runway.
All 5 stages of afterburner lighting is always a kick in the pants, and it's you know, maybe some of us just haven't completely grown up yet, but it's always a thrill to feel the afterburner kick in and accelerate you down the runway, accelerating to takeoff speed, which is roughly 150 knots, just a little over 1,000 feet of runway. So it goes fairly quickly.
We just got the first 3 here. I would expect to see another...
They're coming up on the right, sir.
Okay, we've got another 5 coming up over here on the right. You 2 go to the lead tanker, you 2 go to the number 2 tanker, and they'll brief a port or starboard hose. So, you know, they have a hose to go to. That's what they go to.
Okay, got 2 coming up on your left, sir. Is that a good deal out of your craft?
Yeah, I've got 2 F-18s down here on my left.
Can you get that, Dave? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a pretty day, isn't it?
We were refueling sometimes 6 tankers and 30 fighters in a very small piece of airspace, trying to get everybody across the border, and it was a phenomenal effort to get the airplanes fueled, that many airplanes fueled in such a short period of time, and get them off.
Hey, Benny, give me a quick rep on that tank.
We're talking in
On this guy. 100 feet.
The refueling itself goes real fast. The fighter-type aircraft take about 4,500 pounds of fuel a minute, and your AWACS and larger aircraft can take up to close to 6,000 pounds of fuel per minute, so the refueling itself usually goes pretty fast.
It got to be second nature. You know, that was time to relax, was getting on the tanker. And most of the time, you know, they found good weather. It was pretty easy. You know, just get your gas and go. It's the fastest drive-through you can find.
positive contact.
Bunker, Scott 237, good day.
He understands contact, Bunker.
Flight 43 will be in railroad. Plus 56. Base plus 56.
We came back across the border with much less gas than we had programmed, and we weren't able to make it home to our base, and we cried to AWACS for a tanker that we needed gas. There was no tankers available, but a tanker on his way home to his home base, mission complete, heard our pleas and turned around and headed north and basically rendezvoused with us, even though he was on his way home, and hooked up with us and gave us enough fuel to, just as the sun was rising, gave us enough fuel to bring our jet home. And that was typical of the kind of things that the tankers did for us during the war.
Did you need a little extra? Your leader there need a little bit extra?
Yeah, we need
out of Grissom Air Force Base now?
I'm out of England.
Oh, okay. A little bit high, count 3. Yeah, I saw you guys flip flash. I thought maybe a bit of reserve. There's 2,500 you need some more.
That's good.
Serious one through.
Now my heart's beating pretty fast, and I'm not thinking about anything but doing the job that I've been trying to do right then at that moment, and that it's basically working my radar the best I can. I'm worried about them having anyone airborne to shoot down or interfere with all the strikers.
I was flying as a number 3 position most of the time. I had it pretty good in a sense of finding targets because his lead would go down and his bombs would explode. That's when they would start shooting. Obviously, the downside of being 3 and 4 is they're the ones that get shot at a lot.
The ease in which the air war was presented to the people, you know, it looked like a pushover, but to those that faced it in the early days, it was not a pushover. And the fact that it became very easy was because of some hard-fought battles in the early weeks.
flowing because this is the real thing, and especially day two when they've shot like crazy at you and you know what to expect then and they know what to expect, and you're hoping they don't pick up on the tactics on all the airplanes that we're flying. Flew 3 sorties the very first day of the war, and you know, you come back and you think, okay, well, I can do this. But as it dragged on, after about 30 days of, you know, doing sorties every other day or every day in some respects, then you start to crawl out of the airplane going, I sure hope that's the last one.
We would land and, without shutting down, just pull it right into, we call it hot pit refueling. So with the engine running, they'll just taxi on up, and we'd fill up all the tanks again. Then we'd go into the air, into our parking spot. As soon as we shut down, immediately weapons would start loading up the next weapons and any other minor maintenance involved in the turnaround of the aircraft. The airplane with good maintenance, and I got to put a good plug for our maintenance guys. I owe them a lot of beers. They did a super job for us, and that's what able to keep us flying all the time.
You'd come back from a mission and they'd put you immediately onto alert so you could get scrambled again for another one. I would say normally you were probably doing something within 6 hours from the last time you landed.
missions, and at least the duration of the missions, were fairly demanding, especially initially. So I guess practical things came to mind first. When we were going to get the chance for the next meal, or figure out what our sleep cycle might be for the next day.
Route 8180, intercept at 160.
We had much more freedom of the skies over there than we would normally have at home. Whereas at home you would almost always be under radar monitoring or radar control. Ours was more or less radar advisories unless we were actively involved in a mission and talking to the airborne warning and control people. But as far as coming back to the local base, typically we would have very little need to talk to them outside of 50 miles. So we would go hundreds of miles, basically just talking to people for advisories, but not really being under any active type of radar control.
Was the first aircraft to go in and actually drop ordnance. We arrived within seconds of the beginning of the war. Baghdad was lit up. They obviously didn't know we were coming. They weren't expecting us. And the first series of bombs that we dropped to take out their communications network came as almost a total surprise. From then on, trips into the Baghdad area and some of the larger airfields were almost always met with fairly intense AAA fire. Normally, the aircraft would get into the target unobserved, drop its bombs, and then be shot at on the way out. Because we were able to get in there unobserved, I think that helped us avoid a majority of the AAA and helped allow for the fact that we never did get hit by so much as a bullet. The F-117 consisted of roughly 3% of the total number of aircraft used within the theater of operations, and yet we were able to strike some 40 to 45% of the strategic pinpoint targets that were hit during the war. But even I was amazed at how well we did in combat. We flew almost 2,000 missions against some of the most highly defended targets in Iraq, and the aircraft performed superbly. Not only were we able to put ordnance directly on target where we needed it, but the aircraft came away without so much as a scrape. The technology worked, the accuracy of the systems worked, and the pilots were able to really knock out some tough targets with amazing accuracy. Stealth technology has proven itself to be a force multiplier. It allows you to get either closer to your target or to your target unobserved. And basically in an air-to-air combat, or whether it's an air-to-ground, the guy who can get in closest, the guy who can get the first shot, is normally the guy who wins. Within the Persian Gulf Theater, the aircraft has picked up the nickname of Shaba, or Ghost. The pilots seem to be quite fond of that now and are considering asking the Air Force to make that the official nickname of the aircraft.
Of air-to-ground airplane is not a glory airplane. It was built to take a lot of hits, and it looks like it's already been taking a lot of hits before it leaves the production line. Basically, the A-10 can stick around and talk to different people on the ground. It can talk to other airborne assets and then figure out what the target is. So it's a methodical type approach to things. It's a VFR type airplane, visual flight rules, no clouds, very good weather usually. And we had a lot of bad weather over there. We had guys that popped through the clouds and then found targets because they used to move stuff under it, or the oil slicks and stuff. But the weather wasn't real. I'd say 50% of the days out there, you had to work through the holes. Air-to-air is a lot of ego. It's one machine against another machine. Versus air-to-mud, you have all kinds of realms of things. You're going to take out a tank, you're going to take out a AAA battery, you're going to take out a missile battery. You're just not going to see an F-15 roll in, an air-to-air F-15 roll in on a SAM site or anything. That's not talk to any F-15 guys after this last war, they'll say, you know, they held cap overs at 20+ thousand feet while we did our work, and they were pretty impressed too. So I think the brunt of the jokes are going to stop. It's still an ugly airplane, but it is a lot of fun to fly.
It went well, and we all had the feeling like, boy, we just couldn't believe we could be that overpowering, or that they were planning some kind of surprise attack, that they were going to move their forces. Obviously, the exodus of aircraft into Iran was a concern. We really couldn't figure out why, if they were still intact, why they weren't fighting back to the degree that we were expecting, or if they were planning something else. Later on, as the war went, and the biggest thing I think for all of us is to keep the razor's edge, I guess. You know, we couldn't get lackadaisical or sloppy, I think.
We wondered, you know, what's the big surprise? What's the mother of all battles really going to be? And when's he going to unleash this wrath on us? The apprehension slowly worked its way out to the point where you really didn't think about it that much. It was, you didn't want to become complacent, but at the same time, you didn't have the lump in your throat anymore.
At the beginning, I thought, you know, we got a job to do, we're going to do it. But as the war continued and as the oil wells were set on fire and as the atrocities came out that were being performed against the Kuwaiti people and then to the ecology in the region, I got mad about it. I just thought, you know, whatever has to be done to end this and get this done right.
From a tactical standpoint on the Iraqis' side, they did the smart thing by keeping them on the ground. You know, we got a lot of them on the ground, but they would have lost a lot more if they kept them flying.
What you see on the TV is the end game. Basically, once you found the target, keeping the crosshairs on it is pretty darn easy. And the hard part is getting to that point and fighting your way into the target, defeating the defenses, the AAA, the missiles, and then acquiring your target, just being able to find your specific building in a complex. And the rules we played with there were very, very strict. If you couldn't find your target, you didn't drop.
The minute that we turned around and started heading south to depart Iraq, there was always a tendency to a certain amount of relief. But I think the conscious thing that we really forced ourselves to do was make sure that we didn't let down. But once we had crossed the border back into Saudi airspace and we knew there was no ground threats that would be active against us, then there was a little more time for reflection.
All kinds of guys and letters from all kinds of guys around the world saying, you know, you're actually getting to practice your profession. I always tell them peace is my profession.